Hi, I'm Trent Myers, head of commercial here at Virta, and I'll be moderating our panel today. Very exciting with the number of attendees that have expressed interest, several hundred, in fact, from health plan leads and benefit administrators and consultants. So I appreciate the interest in the webinar today. We have a lot to cover. The main topic today is platform wars with regards to digital health. And so digital health is entering a new wave of consolidation. The platform wars are starting to heat up, and as a benefit leader or a health plan leader, this could profoundly impact your strategy for 2021 because you can offer a whole swath of solutions to your members and employees and maximize your impact on population health. Today, we're extremely grateful to have a great team of panelists that will talk to you more about why Virta has decided to expand our clinical offering beyond type 2 diabetes reversal. So let's talk really quickly about our agenda and we'll get started. We'll kick off with a review of the diabetes and obesity continuum and details on Virta's expansion decision. Then we're going to spotlight US Foods, an interview-style customer testimonial with the benefit leader, Sue Latang, followed by a detailed click-through of clinical outcomes from medical director, Dr. Jeff Stanley. And lastly, we'll close out from a testimonial from a US Foods employee who directly benefited from Virta's treatment. And again, as we described it at the beginning of the call, several people have joined since. We will have 20 minutes at the end. So if you type your questions into chat, we'll go through them as a panelist group at the end of today's presentation. So with that, I'll hand it off to our first panelist, Sami Inkanen, the founder and CEO of Virta Health. Welcome, Sami.
Well, thank you so much, Trent. Very proud to kick off this webinar here, and thank you to more than 100. Looks like we have hundreds of participants here right now. But I also want to thank Sue and Casey and Dr. Stanley for joining the webinar today. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the chronic disease epidemic, and hopefully for most of you participants, this is not new news. So obesity and diabetes in different forms really drives more or less the entire chronic disease epidemic in America. In terms of the magnitude of these diseases, if you only look at obesity and diabetes, combined, these cost the US healthcare system $500 billion. And that it's not a mistake, common mistake, it's $500 billion. And obesity and diabetes also drive many of the other chronic comorbidities, such as hypertension and cardiovascular disease. And if you add those other conditions, you're looking at more than $1 trillion of healthcare spending per year. And so when we started Virta now 5 or 6 years ago, we said we want to solve this epidemic for the benefit of patients and payers, whether they are employers or health plans, who pay for the healthcare costs. And we said we want to do the unthinkable in many ways by starting from the very most difficult thing, which is to reverse full-blown type 2 diabetes. So we said, in order to address this epidemic, if we can address the costliest and most difficult patients, we should be in a good position to solve this entire epidemic. So we started working on Virta 2014, 2015, and we built a treatment and the virtual clinic infrastructure to reverse type 2 diabetes, or as some people like to say, put type 2 diabetes into remission. So that's where we started. And as many of you know, we've now shown in a prospective clinical trial that indeed we can reverse type 2 diabetes or put type 2 diabetes into remission. In our clinical trial, we were able to show that among patients that we treated, 60% had type 2 diabetes reversed at 1 year, which compares to about 0% in standard of care. And simultaneously, again, these are very costly patients, we can save about $5,000 per patient in annual medical spend, which includes direct RX spend and direct spending in diabetes. And even among the patients who are on insulin, which is often considered the more or less last hope drug, if you will, for type 2 diabetes, most of our patients can eliminate insulin. And so we've now been able to show that type 2 diabetes can be quickly and sustainably and safely reversed, both in our clinical trial and among our commercial patients. And perhaps worth adding here that the Virta treatment was also cited as an example of first-line therapy for type 2 diabetes in the American Diabetes Association care guidelines in 2019 and also 2020. And this reversal treatment, just to give you a sense of how effective it is, if you look at the most common diabetes or hypoglycemic drugs, such as insulin and GLP-1s and so forth, and if you look at their performance, they obviously lower blood sugar, A1C, you can see the numbers there from 1.8 to 0.7 in clinical trials. Usually the side effect is that either there's a little bit of a weight gain or the weight is flat. And then the cost of these drugs is hundreds and hundreds of dollars per patient per month. And obviously the drug load is just increasing. So it's, from a payer's perspective, whether you're an employee or health plan, this is like a lifelong subscription, ever increasingly costly subscription to these drugs to keep the blood sugar low. So if you compare the Virta reversal treatment into these most common diabetes drugs, here are the results. So the results are very transformative because, one, we deliver similar or better glycemic control than these drugs, but simultaneously, patients lose a substantial amount of body weight, which we know that drives many of the other chronic comorbidities, which we can improve. But perhaps most importantly, simultaneously, we can eliminate the need for most or all of the diabetes drugs. So in summary, if you compare the Virta diabetes reversal treatment to any of the diabetes drugs, we outperform all of these drugs very substantially. So now that we've shown and worked with a lot of employers and health plans, in fact, more than 100 large organizations nationwide, we've often gotten this question, wow, your diabetes reversal results are quite amazing, but we have many employees and members who are somewhere maybe earlier in the spectrum of diabetes and obesity. They may be obese, they may have prediabetes. Could you please help these other members and employees as well? Could you? And the answer is yes, absolutely. And we would be excited to do that. Again, we started Virta by trying to do the most difficult thing first, which is to reverse type 2 diabetes among people who are at the far end of the metabolic health and diabetes continuum. And now that we've shown that we can reverse type 2 diabetes, we recently formally expanded our clinic offering to cover this entire obesity and diabetes spectrum, from obesity weight loss treatments to prediabetes reversal, and then also harnessing our virtual clinic infrastructure to help people with type 2 diabetes who may not be ready to reverse their disease immediately. And so you might ask, so what does this exactly mean? It just means that we meet patients where they are on this obesity and diabetes spectrum. It may be someone who just wants to lose some weight. There may be someone who wants to reverse prediabetes, or maybe someone living with type 2 diabetes who just needs some support. The bottom line is we meet patients where they are through this one and single Virta virtual clinic that we built to initially deliver the type 2 diabetes reversal treatment. And then we often get this question, there's a lot of things to potentially offer for people living with type 2 diabetes. What makes Virta so different? Why are you even operating in this space? And the answer is pretty simple. Everything we do always comes down to this: transformative outcomes. We as a company exist to make patients healthier, And again, we initially started by reversing type 2 diabetes, which is perhaps the hardest thing to do on this obesity diabetes spectrum. But the same approach we are applying to obesity and pre-diabetes. We want to and have delivered transformative outcomes in these areas as well. And just to give you an example of the weight loss results that we've delivered, Virta weight loss results, as shown in our prospective clinical trial and peer-reviewed papers, outperform the weight loss requirement for FDA-approved drugs by 140%. So weight loss results outperform the FDA requirement for weight loss drugs by 140%. So this is just to say that everything we do is about transformative outcomes. And then secondarily, how we do that is equally important. So I'm going to run these 4 things very quickly here. So we use nutrition to achieve these results. So we have a proprietary science-based medical nutrition therapy that's highly individualized to all of our patients. Secondly, all these nutrition protocols are really delivered through behavioral change and behavioral coaching. We don't ship anything. So we've developed these protocols to effectively change behavior and support our patients. Thirdly, in order to do that, we have a full virtual clinic and remote monitoring infrastructure where we monitor our patients remotely and then collect all kinds of feedback, both qualitative and quantitative, from our patients. And then last, and perhaps most importantly, which I think Dr. Jeff Stanley will talk about in a moment, is to do what we do safely and effectively would not be possible unless we were a provider. So Virta employs physicians nationwide who are our full-time employees who deliver individualized care to our patients. And this is essential for a number of reasons. And I'll just give one example, which is when patients start getting healthier, if you're a type 2 diabetic, we have to de-prescribe medications very, very rapidly. And our provider team, powered by the infrastructure that we build, is doing all of that remotely. So that's why Virta is very different. But if there's one word to remember, it's always outcomes. No amount of features or tools is enough. And that's not the reason to be in healthcare. The reason to be in healthcare is to deliver transformative outcomes, both clinically and economically. So from an employers or health plans perspective, now that we have this expanded offering and be able to address patients where they are, the message really to the members and employees is simple. Virta is the diabetes expert. Whatever needs you have, wherever you are in terms of your readiness or where you are metabolically on this obesity diabetes spectrum, Virta is there to help you. We have the right expert, we have the right expertise, we have the right programs to help you. And all you need is this one place to go to. So we wanted to make it very easy. So I'm just going to finish off very briefly recent news about Virta. First, I wanted to highlight that although I mentioned clinical trial many times, we now work with more than 100 large organizations nationwide, ranging from the US government, such as the Veterans Administration, large employers such as Comcast and US Foods, and then also a number of large health plans, both nationwide and statewide. And then perhaps least importantly is to mention that we just recently publicly announced our Series D financing led by Sequoia Capital. And the only reason I mentioned this is we obviously want to be well-funded and reliable partner for years and decades to come. So this is just to show that we are well capitalized and ready to serve our partners for years to come. With that, I'll hand it back to the team. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sami. Next up, we have Sula Tang from US Foods. She's a benefit leader at US Foods that we've been working with here at Virta for almost 3 years. She's been a strong advocate and supporter of Virta from day one of this partnership and has helped bring Virta to US Foods employees. US Foods is considered one of the most progressive employees in the country in providing benefits for their employees. So I personally welcome you, Sue, to the panel to kick us off really quickly, if we can hear you, can you introduce yourself to the audience and expand a little bit about your specific role?
Yes. I'm Sula Tang, and I'm glad to be here with you guys today. I'm responsible for the communications and compliance and wellness strategy at US Foods. We have over 25,000 associates, and like we like to say at US Foods, 40,000 plus belly buttons. And so it's a privilege for us to have a program like Virta, where we can provide that to our associates.
Thanks, Sue. Just a quick question. We'll ask a couple before we move to our next topic, but this is really a highlight for us to hear your perspective. Why did you decide to partner with Virta? What are some of the top reasons?
So first and foremost, we have the traditional diabetes management program. And with US Foods, it's a matter of choice for our associates. So one of the things we like to do is not tell folks what to do about their lives. That's their lives and their health. But one of the things that we pride ourselves in doing is providing options. And while the program that we have for managing diabetes is great, folks love that program. There are quite a few enrolled in that program. We also wanted to provide some options. We wanted to provide options so associates can better their lives. We also wanted to provide these options in order to save money, both for the associates and the company as well. And with regards to Virta, we wanted a program that showed results. We wanted clinical studies. And trust me, that was big for us when we decided to go with Virta.
So thank you. Sami just articulated a plan where we would expand our offering to cover the metabolic health, platform, if you will, to use that term. Why is US Foods excited about this clinical expansion?
It seemed to go in the right direction. With regards to our population, a lot of us are sedentary. We have folks in the distribution centers, and it's pretty much work, home, work. And so it was a natural progression. We realized that we started off with 30 cases, and it grew quickly, 30 cases, and now it's throughout US Foods. So one of the things that we wanted to do is to make sure that we provided options for these associates. And so now that we've done the full reversal, we're now going to expand into the pre-diabetes because people like to take baby steps sometimes and not go full reversal. So with that, it'll be an option and choice for our associates.
So thanks for that. And to put you on the spot just a little bit, you did mention choice, you mentioned traditional diabetes management options. How does Virta differ from those traditional diabetes management solutions from your perspective?
So based on what we've seen, and again, nothing is wrong with the traditional method. There's some folks, they're not ready to make any changes. They just want to keep taking their medications, do what their doctors tell them, and that's okay. We're perfectly okay with doing that at US Foods. But there are the other set of folks that's not enough for them. They want something that's life-changing. And at US Foods, we're always willing to try something different, to shock the system. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. With regards to what we were looking at is something a solution where we can reduce A1C levels, reduce medications, weight loss. All of that was part of the reasons why we wanted something a little different. But like I said, the traditional way works as well for US Foods and some of their associates. And so, Virta has proven themselves, and expansion was just the right thing for us to do at this point.
Thanks for that. And so we've been partners for some time now. What impact have you seen Virta make for the US Foods employees to date? Not the anticipated expansion, but what have you seen so far?
Well, I will tell you, when we started off with Virta, I was a skeptic. I'll be quite honest. And Virta has changed my mind very quickly. My parents are both diabetics, And so this was near and dear to my heart, providing a solution for our associates. And once I saw the results, not from just Virta, it's one thing to get it from Virta, but it's also the best results was coming from the associates, the testimonials. When we first started, like I said, with 30 cases, and then we quickly expanded to every location at US Foods. And people were asking for it, like, why aren't we part of the process? Why aren't we part of the solution? And what we've gotten are the testimonials. And I will tell you, I remember quite vividly when I went from skeptic to believer. It was a call with Virta, and they were giving us their results, the outcomes of the solution that we had put in place for our associates. And there was one particular employee, Kevin, and he started, there was a video on Kevin, and they played that for us. And that was the first time we had seen it. And at that point, we realized that this truly wasn't about us, number one, as HR folks, but our associates and the outcomes, the solutions that we were providing for the associates and their families. This associate brought us to tears, to be honest. It was myself and my boss and Virta, and we were getting goosey, like we say at US Foods. And it was because of what Virta had done for this associate. He had lost tremendous amount of weight. He was able to run around and be with his family. He was eating healthier, and he himself will tell you, when he started, he was a skeptic, and it was to prove that Virta was a scam. And now he's one of their biggest cheerleaders and an ambassador for the program. So one of the things that I am seeing is not just a decrease in the claims dollars spent. We have a reduction in claims on the medical side. On the physician side, we're also seeing people reducing in terms of weight loss, significant weight loss. We're also seeing that they're experiencing a better way of life, and they're quite happy and not thinking of leaving US Foods as an employer at all. So for me, it's life-changing, and that's what we wanted to do, provide a solution that was life-changing, not just for associates, but for US Foods as well. Because, you know, at the end of the day, yes, we're in the business of making money, and that's very important, but our associates are the main ingredient to what it is that we do at US Foods, because without them, there's no US Foods. So putting a program like Virta in place for our associates, I cannot be more proud to be part of that process.
So that's amazing. I didn't know you were going to talk about that, but we focus a lot on saving. We focus a lot on outcomes and results and what we can do for an employer, because that's who we typically talk to. But at the end of the day, it's about getting people healthy. And we do know Kevin, and I was going to say that he was a skeptic, if memory serves. And that's a great story. So I really appreciate you sharing. So Sue, this is really awkward. I would prefer just to be in the same room by a fireside chat, sitting on a couple of chairs. But thank you very much for joining via Zoom. And I'd love for you to hang out and be a part of our panel at the end, because I'm sure there's a lot of questions that the audience would like to ask you. But thank you so much for your time.
Sure, you're welcome.
With that, we will switch to Dr. Jeff Stanley, who's the medical director here at Virta. He'll be sharing Virta's clinical outcomes from our partnership with US Foods specifically. Dr. Stanley, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks so much, Trent. Thanks everyone for joining. So again, I'm Dr. Jeff Stanley. I'm a medical director at Virta. I work with our commercial team on working with discussing Virta with new clients, and also have the honor of being able to report our outcomes back to our partners. And in fact, actually was speaking with Sue just yesterday, going over some of our 1 year and longer results with US Foods. And it's always remarkable, how consistent these are across populations, despite there oftentimes being more difficult populations to reach. In addition, I'm also a practicing physician. I've been on the team at Virta for almost 5 years now, and actually am licensed to practice medicine in all 50 states. So I get to work with our patients all across the country, including quite a few US Foods patients as well. Okay, so now I get to dive into some of the really exciting outcomes. And these outcomes are taken from our patients with US Foods who have completed a year of the Virta treatment. And the big take home point here again is that US Foods and Virta together are working to reverse type 2 diabetes in their employees. And again, just definitionally, when we talk about diabetes reversal, it's really about getting the hemoglobin A1C, or the average blood glucose over a 3-month period, below the diabetes range, while simultaneously reducing the diabetes medications. And again, this is something that is generally pretty unheard of in standard diabetes management or standard care. To highlight a couple of the results that we've seen in this group. So first of all, in terms of A1C improvement, we saw an average of a 1.1% drop in A1C. And to dive in there, it's from 7.72% to begin with, down to 6.6% on average. And as Sami showed before, this is comparable or better than a number of medications without the side effects, without needing to inject a medication daily or weekly, and without the weight gain that's often seen in a number of those meds. The next outcome to highlight here is weight loss. So we generally say that, we're not pushing weight loss as the first line goal with our patients, particularly those with type 2 diabetes. The goal is really improving metabolic health, but it definitely is a nice side effect. And what we saw in this group is that people lost an average of 6.5% of body weight over that year, or about 15 pounds on average. And it's important to note that there's a wide variability there. We see patients quite frequently who lose 100 pounds or more. We also see patients with type 2 diabetes who have a genetic predisposition, actually don't have to lose any weight, but still see the improvements in their hemoglobin A1C and in other factors. And then finally here, these results you see, the A1C improvement and the weight loss, are done simultaneously with medication deprescription. So 62% of diabetes-specific meds are eliminated over that time period. So this is something that is, saving money very quickly, because people often can get off the medications within a few weeks or months. And then that cost savings is compounded over time as they're not taking the medication and refilling it over and over again. And then in addition, it also does tend to be pretty life transforming, because again, if you can imagine, if you've been injecting insulin 4 to 5 times per day for years and years or even decades, not having to do that really is a game changer for people. Now, this is just another way to look at glycemic control across this group. And just to orient you here, the top line is the baseline hemoglobin A1C data on this group of patients. And to highlight a couple of areas here, on the right side in red, you can see that 35% of patients at the beginning were in what we consider poorly controlled diabetes range, so hemoglobin A1C above 8%. And that's important for a number of reasons. So hemoglobin A1C above 8% is an area where people see more of the long-term comorbidities and issues with diabetes. So things like amputations, heart attacks, renal failure, and so forth. But interestingly, it's also an area we've seen lately with COVID, where the risk of mortality actually dramatically increases. So one study in China actually showed an 11 times higher risk of death in people in this poorly controlled range. Then moving to the left, 27% of folks were in the 7 to 7.9% range, 21% 6.5 to 6.9, and then 17% had an A1C less than 6.5. Now let's fast forward to 365 days later. You can see that poorly controlled group went from 35% down to just 9%. We also saw, basically an overall shift to the left, where now 52% of people have a hemoglobin A1C below the diabetes range, and another 18% are below 7, which is considered well controlled. So we really shift things pretty dramatically, from 38% of people being well controlled at the beginning to 70% at 365 days, and again, while getting people off of medications. Another way to look at that reduction in diabetes medications is this graph. And what we mentioned again is that 62% of the diabetes-specific meds were eliminated by the 1 year mark. And this graph shows in light blue is our clinical trial data that Sami spoke to before. Dark blue is from our broader enterprise population. And then the green line is from our US Foods population. And the big thing here you see is that these are very consistent. And honestly, you could layer on multiple graphs from other groups as well. It generally tends to look very similar. So you can see here that, even at that 80-day mark or 120 days, the more than 50% of meds have been eliminated. And then that can use to reduce over time while people are improving their glucose. But to think about it again, if you think about it from an individual patient's perspective, think about someone that's been on insulin for 30 years and gets to stop taking the medicine because they don't need it anymore. That's honestly, people tell me all the time that it's one of the best days of their life. It's also a reason why I feel like I have the most rewarding job I could have, because I'm able to give that good news repeatedly, again and again every day. Now to dive into the weight loss. So if you look at the groups of patients that we've been treating and look at their weight loss over time, one thing that's important to note is that there's a kind of a clinical threshold of clinically viable weight loss or clinically significant weight loss. And that's usually about 5% of body weight. And a number of studies have shown that if someone loses 5% of their body weight, they have ongoing benefits for years after. So in the type 2 patients, there was an average, again, of 6.5% of body weight loss. And then we saw in our prediabetes patients, 9.5% of body weight loss. And one of the potential reasons for the discrepancy is a lot of the patients with type 2 are, again, on medications that can cause them to gain weight or make it more difficult to lose weight. So they may have a harder time losing weight, at least while they're on those meds. But again, this is still a clinically significant amount of weight loss, and also something that really from an individual basis is something that patients really care about. Losing weight makes them feel better, can make them more effective at work, miss less days. Those are all things that tend to be associated with losing weight. Now to look at why we care about prediabetes. Obviously diabetes is a huge issue, very expensive, costly medications. But prediabetes is a huge issue as well, and that's a reason why we've decided to expand and really tackle this. So if you think about it, generally about 29% of patients with prediabetes are expected to progress to type 2 diabetes within 3 years. Now we don't know which folks those are, but it's a pretty consistent progression that's seen. So if you think about with US Foods, probably has about 1,000 folks living with prediabetes today. So you'd expect that within 3 years, almost 300 of those folks will progress to type 2 diabetes. And that can be really expensive. So if you look at this graph, it basically shows the difference between, in light blue, someone who doesn't progress to type 2 diabetes, someone who remains in prediabetes range or goes below that, versus people who progress. And what you can see is that the first year, there's an additional $2,400 in expenses. Then cumulatively, that goes up to more than $5,000, and then more than $8,000 difference by year 3. So, and again, after someone is in that range, traditionally, that's going to be money that you're spending year after year, and also a larger burden on patients year after year as more meds get added. Now to look at the results that we've seen with US Foods patients in Virta. So we're preventing that progression of prediabetes. So the patients that have enrolled, 0%, none of them have progressed to type 2 diabetes. And again, 9.5% of body weight loss, which is a very significant amount for folks. And then finally, just to touch back on the expansion that we've been really excited to announce. We've been really laser focused over time on diabetes reversal. But what we've seen is that as we've built this clinical infrastructure, the physician supervision, the health coaching, the amount of feedback we're able to give to patients, we've really seen that we're able to affect change across the spectrum. and that for people who aren't able to maybe necessarily change their lifestyle at this time, we can give them all of that monitoring and support and help and be there for them and do sort of the diabetes management side of things. And then we're also able to reverse conditions like prediabetes and obesity. So we're really excited to be able to offer that. We think it really helps employers to be able to offer this full suite to their employees and let people figure out where they fall on the spectrum. So I'll turn it back over to Trent.
Dr. Stanley, thank you for that. And you do need to hang around because there's 8 questions I already have for you that are going to come your way in a little bit. But next up, I'm really excited. We're honored to be joined by one of our Virta patients who's volunteered to share her personal story. Casey is a Virta rock star, and she's seen so much success in her life, not only in metabolic health, but in other ways, and her family's been super supportive of this journey. So I think really to hammer the message home, we wanted to take a moment to talk with one of our actual patients and hear about life before Virta and some of the benefits that she's received from the treatment. So Casey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Yes, so what was your life before Virta? And, maybe before that, maybe introduce yourself and, your role and what you do for a living and a little bit about yourself before you answer that question.
Okay, absolutely. Well, I'm Casey Reynolds, and I am a almost 23 veteran year employee with US Foods, and married, 2 great kids. I stay at home now and work from home, so it's been pretty good here recently. And I started my Virta story, in August of 2018. I had been looking at trying to get healthier. I was diagnosed with diabetes in 2007, and it runs very prominently in my family. So I knew that eventually it would probably hit me. And so it did. And, and in the beginning, I kind of worked on it, tried to make sure that I was eating healthy. And then it just got to the point that, I started eating what I wanted to. I gained a bunch of weight, had no energy, and, just didn't take the time to work on myself. My kids were smaller, or younger and in school doing sports. So, I kind of put all my focus on them and kind of not on myself. So when US Foods started promoting the Virta program, I looked into it and I thought, oh, it's offering me a coach, just somebody that's going to drive me nuts and, send me all these emails about what would you eat? Did you take your medicine? That type of thing. And so I kind of put it off in the beginning. Then I started doing some research and found that, that I did want to try it. So that's kind of how I got started on the Virta program.
So how did you find out about Virta? I mean, you said, was it a benefit offering that you saw in open enrollment, or what was the motivation for you to join, and how did you hear about it first?
Yeah, so it is part of our benefits package, but US Food did a really phenomenal job of just kind of e-blasting it. They would send us multiple emails, once a week, every couple of weeks. I even saw it on Facebook a couple of times, social media. So it just kind of kept showing up everywhere I was. And it was kind of like a sign to just dig into it, try it. If it works, it works. If it don't, it don't. It wasn't going to cost me anything. I wasn't going to lose anything by not trying it. So, I am thankful that US Foods did offer the benefit. I've been with the company a long time, and I've seen benefits come and go. But, this one is really near and dear to my heart. And I think it's probably the best benefit we've had, in my opinion.
That's really great to hear. And I want to double click probably with Sue on how you communicate that, maybe in our Q&A. But back to you, you talked about the stresses, you talked about your focus, it wasn't on yourself, you decided to try this program that you heard about. What's your life been like post-Virta? What have you seen? How has Virta impacted your health and well-being personally?
Oh my God, it's been amazing. I've seen I've always, been a pretty confident person and not really, have had to deal with that. But, I've seen my confidence rise just in myself. Like I said, I was able to lose 47 pounds, which was awesome. But the biggest thing for me was getting off medication. So I had gotten up to 5 pills a day, and I was like one step from having to take insulin. And, that was one thing that I did not want to do. And so when I started Virta, I started August of 2018, and I was completely off meds by April of 2019. And I have been able to keep my A1C at 5.3 since then. In fact, I just had a yearly checkup, and my A1C was still 5.3. So I've been able to maintain that since starting the program, which has been phenomenal for me. It become a lifestyle change. One thing that, I worry about my children being, maybe getting this just because of the heredity that comes with it. And, I've tried to educate them as well. Hey, let's look at this stuff. Let's watch what we're eating. So that's been a big benefit for me, is been able to educate my children. So in the future, they won't have to deal with the same issues that I had.
So you mentioned that your family's been really supportive. Did they jump in with you, or did we have two different dinner plans going on at your household?
In the very beginning, it was very much two different dinner plans. But then I've kind of started migrating them to that. In fact, they found some items that they liked better, being able to prepare in the Virta way. So, I've incorporated a lot of the Virta way. But again, there are some nights that, it is two separate meals.
So these results, A1C 5.3 and maintaining it, best benefit that US Foods has offered from someone who's been there 23 years, which is super impressive. And then 47 pounds weight loss is just amazing. So I applaud you for sharing your story with this group. I know sometimes that's hard, but you're the reason we do what we do. And I really appreciate you personally for jumping on. And if you wouldn't mind staying, I'm sure there's going to be a couple of questions for you, but just thank you, Casey, for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. And just kind of one thing I just kind of wanted to add to, my sister was recently diagnosed with diabetes, and her place of employment doesn't offer anything like this. So I've been able to help her and educate her using this program as well. And she's seen great results too, and has been able to lower her A1C. So, like I said, it's near and dear to my heart. I will forever be grateful to US Foods. And I've told them before that, as long as I'll be a Virta patient forever, just because I'm so passionate about the program. And so anytime that I can jump on a webinar or anything, I would be more than happy to.
Thank you so much. We're going to take you up on that, but I have a little bit chills from your closing statement there. So thank you so much for sharing. Those are amazing results. Hats off to you and congratulations. Thanks again. So
thank you.
Now for the anxiety part of my presentation, where I'm getting text and chats and my documents on questions, and I will do my best to get these to the right participants in our panel. And thank you for everybody's participation. And thank you, Shannon, for giving us time to go through this. Let's go. There's a couple from Sami, and I'm going to give you two, one strategic, one product related. So the first question is, why did Virta decide to expand in chronic metabolic disease where others are expanding to MSK, mental health, etc.? And the second question, that's a product question, is, as you extend your program to obese and pre-diabetics, which is amazing, do you intend to continue to use finger pricks or track new non-invasive technology? So I thought those were loosely tied together, one tactical, one strategic, but maybe if you could start us off, that would be great.
Okay, well, thanks, Trent. Two questions, trying to keep it in my brain, all the questions at the same time. Well, I think the first question was, why did we expand, and why didn't we expand to many or other directions? Three key reasons. One, we want to be not jack of all trades and master of none, but we really want to be what we've been since day one, which is the diabetes expert. It is complicated, it's difficult. Reversing type 2 diabetes is not trivial. It takes a lot of hard work. So we absolutely want to be, and have been, and will be the diabetes expert. And when I say the diabetes expert, we mean the entire continuum from obesity to diabetes and pre-diabetes. So it's very important to do this well and not try to branch out to other things. So that's reason one for the expansion. And then the second one is just, why did we expand in the first place? Very simple. It's the overwhelming customer and partner demand and questions, like Dr. Stanley, I think, mentioned as well. Now that we've treated people with type 2 diabetes, we just started getting more and more questions. Well, I may have been recently diagnosed, or I'm pre-diabetic, or I'm quote unquote just obese. Could you help us too? So those are some of the key reasons why this expansion, why not do something completely different. But I would add as a third point that while we talk about obesity and type 2 diabetes only, we treat the whole patient every single time. And if you look at even our clinical trial results, obesity and diabetes drive 2 or 3 other chronic comorbidities. And again, in our published and peer-reviewed results, you can see that when we reverse or address diabetes and obesity, blood pressure comes down, improvement in dyslipidemia, improvement in inflammation. And I don't want to put Casey on spot, but probably wouldn't be surprised if that happened to her as well. So we treat the whole person, we talk about obesity and diabetes, but these things drive 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 other chronic comorbidities. So that's what we address. We address the whole person and the whole patient by addressing the underlying root cause, as opposed to playing whack-a-mole of these different symptoms of chronic disease driven by obesity and diabetes. So that's the answer to the first question. Second one, very, very, very quick. We don't track any biomarkers for the sake of tracking. We only track biomarkers that are relevant to the treatment. So if you're type 2 diabetic, you are on hypoglycemic drugs, we have to know your blood glucose. If we're talking about weight loss, for obesity, we don't have to know your blood glucose. And the same goes across the board. If you're hypertensive, you're on hypertensive medications, our providers like Dr. Stanley, you need to know blood pressure. So I guess the second question was about tracking. We track biomarkers that are necessary for the safe and effective treatment of the patient, not that we want to sell tracking devices and we force everyone to prick their finger, even if it's not necessary. So we always take that kind of very pragmatic approach with the ultimate goal of safe and effective care. Hopefully I answered the second question and
you
understood
did.
what the person was asking.
I believe that you did. So Casey, real quick, you talked about avoiding insulin, dramatic improvements. You also mentioned in your brief discussion with me that you were on 5 medications, and you can totally say plead the fifth, but were you able to reduce those medications that you were on originally? I know you said you were able to stay off insulin, but just interested in some of those health benefits as well.
Yeah, so in the beginning, when I first started the Virta program, there was one, and I can't think of the name of it at this moment, but I actually stopped it. They asked me to stop it to start the Virta program. And then as we progressed, they lowered my my medicines. And then by April of 2019, I come completely off medicine. So I haven't been on any medicine since then. And kind of to answer something that Swami made a statement to, as far as tracking. So for me, the tracking, it kind of keeps me accountable. So when I log in those metrics, my coach can see, my doctor that's assigned can see, and, they reach out to me if they see something that looks wacky, or if it looks great, they'll send us say, hey, kudos to you. but it also, because you don't see your primary doctor that often, especially now in the whole COVID world, they are able to monitor me on a daily basis. And so if something was to happen or with those numbers, they see it immediately and they reach out and say, hey, what's going on? Is it an error in your system, or, you know, are you having issues? So I think just kind of kudos to the tracking. I think it's great. I like having that accountability and having the folks in the background looking out for me in addition to my primary doctor.
And I would just add there, thank you, Casey. You gave a lot of credit to us and our providers, but we are really just co-pilots in your care. At best, it's you who have succeeded and made yourself healthy. So just phenomenal and wonderful job, and echoing Trent's words. Thanks for sharing your story, because I'm sure for listeners, hopefully it's helpful, but for us as well, this is why Virta exists. This is why we work hard. It is you and your kind of results why we exist. So very grateful that you wanted to share this openly. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So tying things together, Dr. Stanley, I believe these are for you. From a physician perspective, Casey talked about it, Sami talked about it. Why is medication deprescription so important? And then how much pushback do you get from PCPs when you adjust meds for clients? How do you interface with primary care physicians? So there's 3 questions there, but they totally tie together. So hopefully you can, address how we work with a customer's primary care physician, and then your views on medication deprescription.
Yeah, so to start with the deprescription question, I think first of all, it's important to note that, I'm not anti-medication. Our team isn't anti-medication. There are certainly conditions and, levels of diabetes control where people do need to be on medications. So it's really about, for us, figuring out what's the optimal plan for someone. And like the reason that I enjoy the deprescription so much is because it's really about empowering patients to regain control of their health. As Sami mentioned, Casey is able to make these incredible improvements through her continued hard work. We're there to support her. We're there to step in if there are issues, or, if there's a little bit of a slip up, we can intervene as needed. But it's really about empowering people to make those changes, and then more importantly, to maintain them over time. And so when it comes to the medications, it's again, watching closely, reducing them quickly if someone is running towards low blood glucose, which can be dangerous. And more gradually taking people off of medications that they no longer need. So it's really a process, and it's something where we're watching the glucose closely. We're watching other things, weight and blood pressure, and being really targeted about how we manage the meds. And then to the other questions around, primary care providers and how we interface, the way to think about it is, we're basically a virtual specialty clinic. So the same way that someone would work with their local endocrinologist or cardiologist, and then that specialist would report data back to the PCP, that's the way that we work. So when someone enrolls, we gather that information, we send regular updates back to the primary care physician and the medical team, and so that we can stay on the same page in terms of the changes that are seen. And before I joined Virta, I was a primary care doc for a number of years, so I've always been concerned about preserving that relationship. And so people still maintain their primary care relationship. We encourage them to see their PCP to deal with the whole spectrum of medical conditions that they may be dealing with. But we're really focused on that metabolic health. And again, what we've seen again and again is honestly very minimal pushback. Primary care docs are on average, extremely busy. There's just too much work and too many patients to be able to spend the time to help someone make these lifestyle changes or adjust meds on a daily basis. And so what we hear pretty consistently is, keep doing what you're doing, work with your Virta team to adjust those medications and hopefully get off them. And we actually get a lot of fun feedback where people go back and see their PCP and, kind of strut into the office and show off, how much weight they've lost and the improvements that they've seen in their health.
Thank you very much. Next, Sue, if you're with us, I have a couple of questions that I will try to synthesize. But you mentioned choice. Casey mentioned US Foods are doing a really good job of communicating it out. Those two things are sometimes disconnected. So first of all, how do you encourage employee participation in the programs and engagement in Virta from a benefits perspective?
So the first one is, like I stated initially, we have choice. So there are two programs, diabetes management, and we have Virta the reversal. And again, it's not a one size. We're just trying to attack this from multiple angles. It's not a one size fits all. And so when we advertise and we communicate, because that's what I do, we try doing it using various mediums. So the first thing we would do is send an email out from the benefits team so they know this isn't a scam. Otherwise, they'll be calling IT constantly. And then we don't do targeted emails or text messages because you don't know who has prediabetes. Sometimes they don't even know they have diabetes. So we want the entire population to be aware of the programs that we have at no cost to them, especially this. And so we use there's Yammer, it's like Facebook for us internally. There's also a page that we have on our intranet that talks about our programs. We have banners. We also, what I've put together is wellness champions. So every distribution center, we have about 65 plus distribution centers across the US. And we also have wellness champions. And they are the ones who champion our programs. And so I educate them, I inform them. And so when an associate comes to them, which is the first point of contact for our associates, they are privy to the information about Virta. So they're able to provide that to the associates. The other thing that we do is we also, in our ecosystem, we have other programs. So what we do is we have them refer folks to the other programs. So for instance, if someone calls Blue Cross Blue Shield, they are aware that we have a diabetes reversal program. And so they will tell the associates about the management program and the reversal program. So what we do, if we can't reach them, at least someone in the ecosystem, once they've contacted them, will be able to do that on our behalf. So it's a matter of, like we said, you know, there's the traditional and Virta. And with Virta, the goal is reversal. And that's what we like. The fact that there's a goal in getting people off their meds, making them well, making them whole, instead of docs just prescribing medication and not solving for anything. And that's one of the reasons we provided this option.
So there was a question from the field too about how did your partnership with Virta come about? Did you partner with a health insurance plan or work directly with the vendor?
So we're part of a group called EHIR, and it's like a Shark Tank. And so that's how we found out about Virta. And our prior VP introduced us to Virta as well. And so it was a no-brainer for us. Initially, like I said, we were skeptical because we just didn't know better. All we knew were the management programs. And this was just eye-opening for us, though we started off as skeptics. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. It's the reduction in weight loss, in medications, and the fact that folks don't have to see their PCP as often, a decrease in our medical claims, in our PCP claims. It's a win-win for US Foods and a win-win for our associates. And like I said before, our associates is the main ingredient to what we do. Without them, we're nothing. So this is really a good program for our associates. And like Casey mentioned, it's at no cost. And so there's nothing to lose. You absolutely have nothing to lose, but not joining. That's about it. That's the only thing that you would lose out on, not joining. So it's pretty good. We're happy with it.
Thank you. So our scheduled time is, we're running up against the end, but the questions continue to come in. So I'm gonna try to process a few more, and I love the interaction. So Jeff, I believe these are for you, and I really like this question. how effective is Virta for minority groups, thinking about the ability to impact diets that are very different from the typical American diet? So why don't you do that one first, and I have one for you right on the heels, but I'll do them one at a time.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and something that we've really focused on over time. You know, we do work with a pretty wide variety of folks from different ethnic groups, different racial backgrounds, even just different parts of the country. And really, I think the main way that we've been able to address that is really through our individualized health coaching. So our health coaches are working really closely with an individual patient to figure out, what's their culinary preference, whether it's vegetarian or whether they're South Asian or Hispanic, and to figure out what are some substitutions we might be able to do. What are some traditional foods that fit in that won't raise their blood glucose. And we've done some analysis where we've looked at different groups and seen that the results have actually been really consistent across different ethnic and racial groups. We work with Native American tribes and have really done a lot of research into what the food environment is like on a reservation or in different parts of the country. So it's an ongoing process, but it's really about figuring out what the food preferences are for that patient, giving them the right materials so they know what to do. I mean, one of the things that's been really interesting is, like, with US Foods, we have quite a few patients who are truck drivers, right? So they're on the road the majority of the time. And even with them, we're able to figure out what can they eat at a fast food restaurant that will allow them to still achieve their goals.
I think if I may add here quickly, I think Dr. Stanley mentioned individualization many times. I think that one of the testaments to high degree of individualization is the fact that our 1 year patient retention on the Virta treatment, 1 year retention, you would expect this type of a treatment maybe to have 20, 30%, maybe 40% if we are very successful at 1 year. In our clinical trial, we had 83% 1 year retention, 83%. And among our commercial patients, we have many groups where it's north of 90%. On average, it's pretty close to 90%. So I think one key reason is the fact that we highly individualize and meet the patients where they are when it comes to these recommendations. And of course, the second part is all the support that Dr. Stanley and his team and the tech-enabled virtual clinic infrastructure allows us to do. But if we don't individualize, most patients would leave after the first week.
So that ties into, and I don't know if this is the last question, I'm sure Shannon will cut me off, but for both of you, how are the outcomes after year one? Like, what do we see with people in the second year, 2+ year? Do they maintain their progress over time? And I know from me personally talking to a lot of people like Casey for different reasons, some have been battling diabetes for 15 years, and so they want to make sure they get it right, and there's a support group. But with data, what are you seeing after a year?
Well, I guess a couple of things quickly, and then Dr. Stanley then can complement. We're actually in the process of collecting our 5-year data. So we have very long-term data. We're in the process of collecting 5-year data. We published peer-reviewed 2-year results. We've also published 3.5-year results. So we have very, very long-term data already to show. And just to give one example, we talked about the importance of glycemic control and eliminating medications. The eliminations accelerate and increase from year 1 to year 2. To take an insulin as an example, I think we almost doubled the insulin reduction from year 1 to year 2. So there's phenomenal sustainability. But it is important we support, like Casey said, like it sounds like she appreciates the support and positive oversight to make sure that the results are maintained. But in light of the data, it looks very, very good so far. Doesn't mean that 100% succeed 100% of the time, like that's just not real world. But it's very sustainable in light of the results.
Yeah, just to piggyback on there, that's a question that we've got very very frequently. You know, initially we published 10-week data, and the question we got over and over again was, well, what happens at 6 months or 1 year or beyond? And luckily, we've been able to answer that question, you know, with peer-reviewed literature. And then, you know, what we've seen with our commercial population is that, you know, people are also continuing with the treatment for quite a while. You know, I have quite a few patients that are past 4 years on the treatment with me personally. And what we see is that things ebb and flow. You know, people might be doing great for a period of time, but then, you know, I don't know, something like a worldwide pandemic hits and everything gets shaken up. And so they might need more support during that time period. And so being able to work with people on an ongoing basis, you know, maintain those results, and like I mentioned, intervene when something tricky comes up. You know, we're there every step of the way, and we can jump in when needed. And when people are cruising, we're just checking in and, you know, making sure things are still going well.
So I'm getting the hook, but thank you very much for the participation, the questions. I did my best, I promise, to get through as many of those as possible. If there are outstanding questions, trent.myers@virtahealth.com. I'll be happy to write up answers for you and get it back. But I just want to say thank you to Casey. Thank you to Sue. Thank you to Dr. Stanley and Sami for this panel, and appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you very much and have a great day.